Hello, folks. It's Julien of the Lafayette Trail. I hope you're all doing well. I'm joined today on Zoom by our wonderful Kat Smith. That's our social media manager and a member of the Conde Nast chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And today we're going to be talking, Kat and I, with Matt Harron from American History Night. It's a wonderful Instagram page that has a lot of followers and does a lot of wonderful content. Matt, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Julien and Kat.
You bet. We're excited to have this conversation with you. So about Lafayette, about France's involvement in the American Revolution, the vision of Lafayette for what would become the United States, the role that France played. All of these are, in my opinion, good questions to have, and certainly good starters for broader conversation about what this country is about. And so, we're just going to have a casual conversation, the three of us here, about these topics. And I believe you have some questions for us, Matt. So if you want to get started and get this conversation going, please go forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Julien. So I've been, a big fan of the American Revolution just as a topic, and I've covered it several times on my page and Instagram. And I've just been fascinated as I've dug into it deeper and deeper in terms of the relationship between France and the United States, and particularly about Lafayette, how he was just kind of totally captured by the idea of America as a republican form of government, as self-government versus a monarch. And, as I dug into it, it's pretty interesting in terms of he just had an epiphany. I think it was at some dinner he was at, where he had kind of been furloughed from his military duties in France. And he just was listening to this Duke talk and say, all these Americans are giving so much trouble to the British in the colonies, and, who do they think they are? And it was having the opposite effect on him. It sounds like right there in his mind, what I read is, I'm enlisting. I'm all in for the Americans.
Yeah. We call it the life-changing dinner. That's kind of in the circles of Lafayette. It's the famous dinner where the flame of American freedom was, started to burn in his heart and commanded him to move here and get involved. It's such a pivotal moment. Absolutely.
He's a pretty young guy, right? He's in his early 20s.
Oh, not even. Yeah. When he gets to America in 1777, he's barely 19, so we're talking about a very young man. And that's always what I like to say, actually, is that this is a man that lost both of his parents when he was very young. And so by the time he was 14 years old, he had inherited a massive amount of money that he could have spent in a variety of ways. And he decided to do it, to spend that money to serve a project of the American Revolution. And I think you can all be lucky that this is a choice he made,
Yeah. I was reading that he signed up and went over and they actually didn't want him initially. They kind of said, right? Yeah. They said, no, sorry, we've got enough French guys coming over here looking for glory. And then they rethought it once they saw how well connected he was, how wealthy he was, and what an asset he'd be.
That's very true. I think today there's something to be said about that. There were French officers that came to the U.S. for money, to be paid by Continental Army, or to get some pecuniary reward. And I think to this day, it's very important to emphasize that what sets Lafayette apart from the rest of the French officers is that he came to give his help and to seek advice from American soldiers and to make himself available, ready in whichever way was in the best interest of the Continental Army. I think that attitude was pretty unique. And I think that started what you see in the books that you've probably have come across as well, the famous love affair between America and Lafayette. I think it's this display of genuine interest in the American cause independently from any reward, because again, he was so wealthy, he didn't have to look for anything on that front, but he could still have said something like that, and he didn't. And to me, that's a very important part of his early life here. The first impression, definitely key in setting in motion his friendship with Washington in particular, but others as well,
Yeah. I saw that he had said something that really kind of endeared him. I think it was to Washington. He said, "I'm here to learn." And that, frankly, Julien, from an American perspective, when we think about our relationship with France and the reputation that French people have as arrogant, to say you're coming here to learn, the Americans, I think, felt that was or Washington felt that was genuine and kind of like a refreshing versus the general perception of the French.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully you're talking about back then. I hope that the French are no longer seen as arrogant necessarily. But maybe, Kat, what do you think about that?
I feel like anymore, it seems like the Americans are considered arrogant for some reason. I think the tides have turned on that. But I think, it's just a cultural thing. It's a different culture. So, I mean, we were colonists. We were getting all these acts and taxes put on us, and we didn't like it. And France was like, well, we're mad at them too. So we're going to just join on to this battle because, we both have a mutual enemy at this point, is King George. So,
Yeah,
and I feel like that kind of relationship where that's what we had in common as colonists and the French people, is that we both had a common enemy, but we also had very similar beliefs, I think. The French people were very similar with trying to be equal, and we wanted that equality. So it was a good marriage between the two cultures and the two places. And it continues to this day. I feel like, when I first met Julien, we joke each other because I'm pretty much American since 1600s here. And he's just fresh off the plane or boat from France. But, like, we have very similar cultural backgrounds in a way, similar kind of music tastes, similar kind of ways of family orientation. So I think that helped back then as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Because
and also there's
that similar path.
There is this, I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a famous preconceived notion that somehow the French hate the British still today, which is wrong. I mean, we have nothing. It's just a joke when there's a rugby game. Let's be honest. But I think back then there was a true desire for the French career military officers in particular to get some revenge off of the defeat of France, the humiliating defeat of the 7 Years' War, what you call here the French and Indian War. But I think, Matt, you've got some questions about that, don't you?
Well, I am curious because my initial impression when I had studied this growing up and what France's role was that they were very hesitant to get involved. And so what I'm curious about is, as I did some further reading, it seems like, no, they were pretty much ready to go. Once they thought this was going to happen, they were pretty much ready to go. Now, maybe they supported it secretly at first, but, they were all in because just what Kat said, it's like, hey, we got to humiliate these English. I ran across a quote that said by the Comte Vergennes saying, Providence had marked out this moment for the humiliation of England. I thought that was great. You could just see them rubbing their hands together and saying, these colonists are going to do what we weren't able to do, or we're going to help them surreptitiously. What was kind of the mood there?
Well, what the quote you just read from Vergennes is indicative of that desire of revenge, the fact that there is a rivalry with England, and that decisions could be made at the state level, like the control of the French state, to get the French armed forces involved just to get revenge of the British. So that's important. But I would still emphasize that there is a moment in which the French officially enter that conflict. And that takes a variety of parameters to join, to intersect at the same time. Like, for instance, at the very beginning, around what you call Lexington and Concord here in France, there is a playwright called Beaumarchais that actually subsidized a private business called Rodrigue Hortalès that was actually sending supply to America already, secretly or in disguise. And what it tells you is, if people have the need to supply help to the colonists in secret, it means that they are operating in an environment that is hostile, not friendly to an official war. And so, in my opinion, and then from what I've read, a lot of people were supportive of the idea of the American Revolution because it would announce a new age for mankind in terms of the protection of individual rights, that kind of stuff. So there were some supporters early on that connected with those ideals. However, the British had implemented a system, an environment that forced the Kingdom of France basically to not officially enter the conflict without getting some sanctions. So it only had to be secret, because had it not been secret, the British would have said something. So I think it's key at the beginning to emphasize that secrecy, because the French state is not willing to commit fully to the American Revolution at the beginning. It takes what you call in America the Battle of Saratoga to convince the French, with behind the scenes people like Lafayette that argue that the colonists can win. They have the potential to win this thing. But the French also needed to be convinced that those American colonists, they were serious people. Like, they meant business. They're not here to make a show. They're here to win their revolution. But to demonstrate the possibility, to demonstrate to the French that we're serious about something, I think it's a pivotal moment. And then after that, all the mechanics that the history books have captured, the alliance of 1778, Yorktown, all that stuff moves forward after that. But I think it's key to make a difference between secrecy and official commitment from the state, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, further reading, I was looking at the role of Ben Franklin. I was wondering if Lafayette had a relationship with Ben Franklin, because as I see it, Ben Franklin was like this worldwide phenomenon. I didn't realize how popular, what a huge figure he was, and very popular in France. And in terms of when he came calling with hat out, are the French going to support us? Both the aristocracy and the population adored Ben Franklin and were kind of like, how can we turn this deity on earth, really? I mean, they loved him so much. He had so much influence. How much did that, first question is, how much did that really influence? And also, did Franklin and Lafayette have a relationship?
Right. Well, Ben Franklin was much older, and it's correct. He had a certain popularity in France as a minister to France, and you probably know also that in America, Ben Franklin was also known for the what is it called in English? The post road. Like, he contributed to science as well. He's known also for that, postmaster.
Absolutely.
So in terms of a connection with Lafayette, what I want to emphasize when I give a talk or when I share any connection between the two men is that Ben Franklin recommended to the Americans in North America to have a certain consideration for Lafayette, that this is a young man that is full of passion, energy. He wants to do stuff. He wants glory. And you need to understand the desire of his, because he has tons of resources that we need. So I think he was kind of behind the scenes in making sure the leaders knew the intentions of Lafayette, the energy that he had, but he also made sure that Lafayette not be killed in a battle. Like, don't put him on the first row because, well, if he dies, this is not gonna help us at all. So I think he provided this on the field understanding of Lafayette's character, and he relayed that to the Americans in North America. And I think it's key, actually. I don't think people emphasize that enough, but understanding Lafayette's character and communicating that to the American leaders was pretty important. I don't know if Kat has to add anything about that, but to me, that's what I would emphasize.
I mean, I think a lot of people are not sure about, there's other key players too, you know, in the Revolution and on the French side. I mean, we both have the Comte de Grasse and we have Rochambeau. And I feel like that's the power trio from France. Obviously, I'm the Comte de Grasse fan because that's my chapter. But I feel like with having all three of them, and the many levels of military experience they all three had, I feel like it did push us over the edge to win. You know, they convinced Washington, instead of going to New York, we went to Yorktown instead. And without the ships, without the manpower and that military knowledge, world knowledge, not just, you know, what Washington and the people in the colonies had, but they had vast amount of experience in wars, in different kinds of wars. So I feel like, you know, it's almost like, I feel like sometimes when I'm studying Revolutionary War and that time period, I feel like it's like a time machine. Somebody went through history and picked up these awesome people and put them all in the same place at the same time. I don't know if you guys feel like that, but I do.
Yeah.
I feel like there's all these brilliant minds, these brilliant people, and they literally just, even on both sides, they just took this to the whole other level. I mean, these brilliant people coming up with a new world, in essence. So it was a catalyst for not only American independence, but French independence, and it changed the British monarchy. So I feel like, you know, they're all connected, like Ben Franklin and all the other founding fathers, they're all connected, you know, and they weren't perfect. We know that from Lafayette. He tried from day one to get them to abolish slavery and to have universal human rights. And they didn't listen to the guy. You know, they said, well, this is what's more important now is just trying to establish this country and
That's
then
right.
move forward.
Yeah, that's what they said.
And you know, I wish I had a time machine. First of all, it would be the best selfie ever. Could you imagine going back in time? But you know, I would say, look, please listen to him, because it would have changed world history, even more so.
Right.
And I mean, it's crazy how almost 50 years later, when Lafayette returned to America, he still was trying to convince the remaining founding fathers to abolish slavery to that day. And they, you know, I mean, could you imagine these little old men talking, and he's still at it, like, hey guys, you still got some work to do here.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. Unfortunately,
50 years later.
Yeah. Early on, I think his youth was working against him. I did want to ask, you mentioned earlier, Julien, that they wanted to make sure Lafayette didn't die too soon or die at all, but
Yeah.
Did they hold him back in those battles? Did they put him in positions where he wasn't going to really face serious jeopardy?
Well, it's hard. I would say it's probably harder to substantiate numerous times, but I think that the intentions from Ben Franklin are there. Obviously, you know that he still was injured anyway because of Brandywine on September the 11th, 1777. So, you know, the injury took place regardless of the intentions of some Americans to protect the life of Lafayette. The injury took place, and I also think this is key to his American affection for him, because if you had any doubt that Lafayette meant what he said, the fact that he bleeds for the idea of a country that's not even his own, I think convinces the rest of the people, if there was anybody left to convince at that point, that he indeed was here for the best interest of the Continental Army and indeed of the world.
I agree. I heard that Washington said something to the surgeon like, treat this man as if he was my son, which to have such a quick kind of affinity for someone I thought was striking. Someone like Washington, who was kind of standoffish, to just take to Lafayette so quickly and kind of adopt him was pretty striking to me.
Yeah, so that was that's not an injury at that point. It's Lafayette goes he makes a trip north. It's in 1778. Off the top of my head, he goes to what's now near Beacon, New York, Fishkill, and the cab actually Johannes de Cab has an encampment there, and I have some materials that actually indicate that he supported Lafayette. He spent some time in what you would call now a hospital, but a field hospital in a building in that community, and that's where the words from George Washington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's I guess it doesn't matter the injury that Lafayette had, as long as it still triggers the feeling that you're describing from George Washington, because that's a friendship that still today remains extremely important, because of course of the status of George Washington as the first president of the United States. And at Mount Vernon today, they make a great deal about his connection with Lafayette. And yes, there is some psychanalysis to get done here on the desire of Washington to have a son in Lafayette, and for Lafayette, of course, to have a father figure in George Washington. I think this has transpired throughout Lafayette's life, and you see even in the tour in 1824 when he goes back to the tomb of George Washington. I think it spans Lafayette's life,
Yeah. So that's a good segue in terms of the trail, and what your core mission is at the Lafayette Trail. Lafayette returned back in 1824 and 1825 to kind of do almost a victory lap of the United States, right? And he was just hailed as a hero, and hailing the relationship between the U.S. and France.
And to connect it, because there is always a connection with the American Revolution, but that tour is really the spirit of the American Revolution that exceeds the original geography of the 13 states, right? It grows to the west, and so Lafayette is going to bring a living evidence of the American Revolution. Wherever he goes, he brings with him the American Revolution. So for these new states that don't have a battleground, a battlefield like Yorktown, Virginia, on their ground, on their soil, they're going to use Lafayette to make that direct connection. So I think it's important to emphasize that. Yes, it's 40 years later, but there's always a direct reference to the American Revolution,
Yeah. I was watching a news segment. I'm in the Detroit area, and Royal Oak is a northern suburb, and they described an incident that happened, and one of the streets they named was Lafayette. And I worked in Detroit for years earlier in my career, and I worked at a building and the street was named Lafayette. And I'm just like, it didn't mean anything to me that much, really. I knew who Marquis de Lafayette was, but I wasn't sure that was named after him. And I'm like, these streets and these towns and everything named after Lafayette.
And most of them are named after Lafayette in the wake of the tour, because that's the tour really cements his status as a national icon. There were a few exceptions, like in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, or what's now Kentucky. But most of the towns, counties, and cities named after Lafayette, it's a direct consequence of the tour. And if you look at where they are located, we do have a map actually showing that on the website of the Lafayette Trail. They are mostly located along the Mississippi River watershed because these are the new states at the time. And I wouldn't be surprised actually if Michigan, that's a later addition as a state after the tour, I wouldn't be surprised if, of course, that town has or the streets refer directly or indirectly to the tour. And I would point out to you, I'm not sure you know this, I don't even know if I mentioned it to you in the past, Matt, but in the state Senate of Michigan today, there's a painting of Lafayette.
Yeah, you did mention that.
Yeah. So, even all the way to California, there are cities like there's a Lafayette, California. And California, we're talking, 30 years after Lafayette's tour, like statehood close to, and they still are going to use his name to claim a connection, to demonstrate that they're Americans as everybody else, and that to me is a powerful statement. It's like, no matter how far the Union grows, the symbol to show that you're American remains the same. And the Lafayette is always in the middle of that recognition process. I think it's very powerful.
Great. I agree.
Okay. Do you have any further thoughts to add to our conversation? I'm pretty happy. I think we have covered a lot here.
Absolutely. No, it's great. And I would just encourage everyone, these videos that you're producing, the Follow the Frenchmen, are just amazing. So, I can't speak highly enough praise for those videos. I think they're really well done. They tell the story and they kind of show the excitement of what you guys are doing at the Lafayette Trail. And
to show you the metrics about that, actually, I'm glad you pointed that out, but we are also posting them on social media natively. And Kat is actually, getting snippets of these videos and she's putting them out there too. And they perform really well. Don't they, Kat, on social media?
Oh, yeah. I feel like, everybody wants history, but they don't want to watch it like a documentary. So Julian makes it fun. It's not dry. He's going around meeting people, petting dogs, meeting little fans and friends along the trail. And even lately, he's been doing his own personal videos of just telling us the facts about where he's at, because he's going to be traveling all around this country in the next couple months. So, it's fun because people are like, I didn't realize that, wait, there's a marker here, or I didn't realize that Lafayette had a statue or a park, or he had an impact in my community, or people are planning their spring breaks or doing stuff with their families now that, things are getting a little bit more opened up. So it's fun because people can log into our pages. They can see, where was Lafayette today? Or, my kid is really they really love Hamilton, which Julian still needs to watch, but
okay.
but they they're trying to tie their kid into the history part of it. So, I mean, Matt, you do a good job with that, with your posts, because it's engaging. It's quick to view, it's digestible. It's not boring. It's fun. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it fun. We're trying to see how we can bring Lafayette to your home, how we can get everybody engaged, interested, connect with people. And I think we're all doing a good job. I mean, it's hard to grab people's attention anymore, but with the power of a French accent, scarf, and knowledge, we can all do this.
Yeah, you do a nice job with that page.
Well, thank you for these final thoughts, Kat. From the bottom of my French heart, I thank you so much. So, Matt, do you have any final thoughts to share, or should we conclude this?
No, I think that's good. I think it's good. I think people really do need to. I've developed a greater appreciation for Lafayette just by following your page, by talking with you, and I really hope that people who follow me, we're going to be doing a post and stories on Lafayette and on the relationship between France and U.S. in the American Revolution. I just hope that I have the same goal as you. I'd like people to know more about Lafayette and know more about the relationship between France and the United States in in the creation of what is, in my mind, the greatest country in the world and world history. Now that's an American view, but that's it's pretty key, that relationship and what's bloomed from it.
There's, yeah, I agree. There is something very powerful about the institutions of America, and people like Lafayette saw it too. I see it as well. I think it's equipped with a particular set of laws. It's a country of laws. It's new in the history of the world to do that. It's unique. It's an American idiosyncrasy, and we're all adding our own piece to that. So yeah, Matt, thank you for joining us. You are really an American history nut, and so it's pleasure to have you with us, and looking forward to seeing your stories and posts. And thank you for spending some time with us today. Appreciate it. And thank you, Kat, for joining us as well.